Mic test, member mic test. 1, 2, 3. Okay. Mic test, member mic test. 1, 2. Okay.
Before we get started, I want to recognize Congressman Stauber from the great state of Minnesota to lead us in the pledge and the prayer.
know that the United States of America is a great country where we work together. In your name,
And I now call the Committee on Small Business to order. Without objection, the Chair is authorized to declare a recess of the committee at any time. And prior to opening statements, I ask unanimous consent to enter a letter to the record from the House Select Committee on the Chinese Communist Party requesting to waive on to today's hearing. Without objection, so ordered. Now, pursuant to the rules of the House and the rules of the committee, I ask unanimous consent that members of the House Select Committee on the Chinese Communist Party be waived onto the committee for the purpose of making an opening statement and asking questions. And without objection, that is so ordered. I now recognize myself for my opening statement. I want to welcome everybody today to the hearing Fostering American Innovation, Insights in the SBIR and STTR Programs. I want to thank our witnesses today for being here, and many of you traveled a long way to get here, and we're interested in your perspectives and your experiences, and we deeply value your time and your voice. Small businesses are the backbone of innovation and economic prosperity in America. The ability to take an idea, develop it into a product, and bring it to the market drives innovation and economic growth, strengthening our nation's competitiveness. For over 4 decades, the SBIR and the STTR programs have fueled American innovation by providing early-stage funding to small businesses, allowing them to develop cutting-edge technologies that strengthen our economy and support our military. From life-saving medical advances to next-generation defense capabilities, these programs have empowered Main Street to turn ideas into reality for the government and the private sector. The SBIR and the STTR programs channel federal R&D dollars in phases to small business, enabling the development of innovative ideas that align with the needs of federal agencies. These agencies can offer SBIR and STTR awards through 2 avenues. First, through targeted solicitations, where the agency requests a product that meets specific requirements, or through open topics where small businesses propose innovative solutions to meet an agency's mission. Prominent companies, including Qualcomm, 23andMe, and Bose, began as small businesses that leveraged the SBIR program to become industry leaders, demonstrating the program's power to drive innovation and economic growth. Our responsibility right here in Washington is to ensure that these programs continue to foster groundbreaking advancements while remaining free from foreign exploitation. In today's hearing, we will examine these programs' challenges and addresses and propose unresolved solutions from the last reauthorization. SBIR and STTR have long supported American ingenuity, yet these vital programs still face growing threats. The CCP continues to exploit the SBIR and the STTR programs, siphoning taxpayer-funded research back to China. This undermines American innovators' intellectual property rights and jeopardizes our nation's national security. The due diligence program established in the last reauthorization continues to face limitations in effectively preventing CCP infiltration. At the same time, small businesses participating in these programs face significant barriers in transitioning from research to commercialization, lacking access to capital. With SBIR and STTR set to expire in September 2025, we have a critical opportunity to make changes to ensure these programs operate efficiently and support small businesses' growth to ultimately accomplish the program's goal of fulfilling R&D needs. Ensuring these programs are awarded by merit after rigorous competition will continue driving the best innovations to the top. Innovators thrive in an environment where competition reigns supreme, where they are free from limitations or caps on their success. Working alongside the Trump administration, we will continue to prioritize policies that protect our innovators, cut bureaucratic red tape, and create an environment where Main Street America can survive and thrive. With that, I would yield to our distinguished ranking member, my friend from New York, Ms. Velasquez.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for calling this hearing to discuss one of our most important priorities of the 119th Congress, reauthorization, the Small Business Innovation Research and Small Business Technology Transfer Programs. The timing could not be more critical. SBIR and STTR are among the federal government's most effective engine for driving innovation. These programs channel just a small percentage of extramural R&D budgets into highly competitive awards that fuel cutting-edge discoveries, create new industries, and drive economic growth. At just under $5 billion annually, these programs have had an outside impact on our economy, helping to launch companies like iRobot, Sonicare, 23andMe, and Qualcomm. They have played a role in game-changing advances, from second-generation LASIK eye surgery to critical mineral recycling that reduces our dependence on foreign sources, to advancements that help us investigate the inner workings of the human brain to study disorders like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. More recently, an SBIR-backed company, Boom Aerospace, whose CEO testified in this room 3 years ago, conducted a test flight that broke the sound barrier over the Mojave Desert. With the help of SBIR and the private capital it has helped attract, our country's innovators are one step closer to bringing supersonic passenger jet travel into reality. Yet, despite its overwhelming success, these programs are among the only core SBA programs that are not permanently authorized. If Congress fails to act before its expiration on September 30th, a lapse in the program will have severe implications for American entrepreneurs. Even a short-term disruption would deliver a substantial setback for America's innovation pipeline. Meanwhile, China is aggressively investing in its own R&D ecosystem. Just last month, the release of their DeepSeek AI model rattled global markets, exposing the complacency of the dominant U.S. firms that have grown too comfortable with their market power. The SBIR program is uniquely positioned to counter this stagnation, funding nimble emerging businesses to challenge entrenched tech giants and restore competition to the innovation economy. In many ways, Mr. Chairman, our task this year should not just be about a simple extension of the programs, but rather a bipartisan collaboration to making SBIR and STTR stronger than ever before. It is my greatest hope that we can work together to grow the programs in several ways. First, we must work to make the program permanent, giving small innovators operating on the cutting edge of their industries more certainty and stability to invest their time, money, and staff into competing for SBIR or STTR awards. Second, we must expand the programs, allowing for greater agency allocation over time and growing the volume of small business grants and contracts available. This will bring more competition to our economy and our industrial defense base. Third, we must work to help participating companies overcome the valley of death by expanding commercialization, services, and growing phase 3 of the program. And finally, we must continue protecting small business firms from foreign threats that seek to undermine our national security. And these are just a few of many priorities we can consider. Thank you to all the witnesses for appearing before us today, and thank you to the chair and ranking member of the Select Committee on the Chinese Communist Party for joining us. I look forward to your testimony. I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. I now recognize the distinguished chair of the House Select Committee on the Chinese Communist Party, Chairman John Molinar, from the great state of Michigan, for his opening remarks.
Thank you, Chairman Williams and Ranking Member Velasquez, for holding today's hearing on the Small Business Innovation Research, as well as the Small Business Technology Transfer Programs. And I want to thank you for allowing Raja Krishnamurthy and I to wave on to this important meeting. The SBIR and STTR programs have long been instrumental in fostering American innovation, allowing small businesses to develop cutting-edge technologies that serve both the public and the private sectors. These programs are critical to maintaining America's technological edge, particularly in industries vital to our national security. That being said, as we examine the effectiveness of these programs today, we must also acknowledge the serious threats they face, most notably the Chinese Communist Party's persistent efforts to exploit these programs for its own military and economic gain. China has systematically targeted American innovation using tactics like talent recruitment programs, state-sponsored investments, and university partnerships to siphon off U.S. taxpayer-funded research. This is not just a matter of intellectual property theft, it is a direct national security risk. Some U.S. firms that have received SBIR awards have later partnered with CCP-linked entities or established Chinese subsidiaries, effectively transferring sensitive technology into the hands of our foremost adversary. The CCP is actively seeking to integrate advanced U.S. research into its military modernization efforts, including through artificial intelligence, quantum computing, and next-generation defense technologies. As the September 30th reauthorization deadline approaches, we must close the gaps that allow China to take advantage of the SBIR and STTR programs. At the same time, we must not lose sight of the core mission of SBIR and STTR, supporting American small businesses. Instead of limiting opportunities for small businesses, we should focus on strengthening safeguards against foreign exploitation while preserving a merit-based system that rewards innovation. The United States cannot afford to let China turn our most successful small business research and development program into a tool for its own strategic advancement. We must take decisive action to protect SBIR and STTR from CCP infiltration and ensure that taxpayer dollars are used to support American innovation, not our adversaries. And I'm confident that under Chairman Williams and Ranking Member Velasquez's leadership, this committee will be successful in doing just that. And the Select Committee on China stands ready to support the Small Business Committee's important efforts to protect American innovation, strengthen our economic security, and counter threats posed by the Chinese Communist Party. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back. Thank you.
Gentleman yields back, and I now recognize the distinguished ranking member of the House Select Committee on the Chinese Communist Party, Ranking Member Raja Krishnamurthy, but I know him better as the Raj, from the great state of Illinois, for his opening remarks.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And by the way, when on my first day of college, I introduced myself. I said, "Hi, my name is Raja," and the person said, "What part of Boston are you from, Roger?" So, in any case, wonderful to be with you. Thank you, Ranking Member Velasquez, my good friend, and of course my good friend and colleague and the leader of our committee, Chairman John Molinar. Thank you for your leadership. I want to take this opportunity to speak on the Small Business Committee about the SBIR and STTR programs. In full disclosure, as a former small business person, my former company actually benefited from SBIR programs. And I lived in the valley of death frequently. And so it's not a pleasant place to be. And SBIR, thanks to the work of this committee and this government, we were allowed to benefit from those programs. And we developed technology for night vision, both for space and for military applications, and it's helping the warfighter today. For decades, these programs have served as the backbone of U.S. research and development, empowering small businesses by turning new ideas into real technology. They've helped advances in defense, energy, and medicine. And in a study from 1995 to 2018 revealed that these programs have created a whopping 1.5 million jobs, averaging over 65,000 jobs annually. These investments have led to breakthrough technologies such as advanced prosthetics for wounded veterans, revolutionary medical imaging systems, and cutting-edge cybersecurity solutions. I want to say, I echo the sentiments of Chairman Molinar. Our adversaries do know the strengths and weaknesses of our innovation ecosystem, and on occasion, they've taken advantage of it and targeted some of the beneficiaries of these SBIR and STTR programs for intellectual property theft. One notable example was a U.S. company that was a former SBIR awardee that lost $1 billion in shareholder value and 700 American jobs after an employee stole wind energy technology for a Chinese firm. As another anecdote, I should just mention, Chair and Ranking Member, when I was running this company in the private sector that I mentioned before, we were actually the victims of an attempted theft of intellectual property by CCP-controlled entities as well. So I know this firsthand. It happens. And so we have to do whatever we can to help small businesses ward it off, prevent it, empower them to avoid being victims of CCP intellectual property theft. Congress and the executive branch have taken steps to address and mitigate many of these threats. For example, the SBIR and STTR Extension Act of 2022 was an important step forward, requiring greater disclosure of foreign ties and participation in talent recruitment programs. These efforts have proven effective in increasing awareness and bolstering protections, but we cannot afford to be complacent when it comes to competing with the CCP. As the SBA Inspector General's 2024 advisory makes clear, our current system still relies heavily on self-reporting from companies, which can lead to resource constraints for the government to verify these reports. We must continue to support resources for due diligence so that we can see the results we enacted back in 2022. Finally, and above all, we must recognize that federal funding for research and technology development is not just an investment in the present, it's a commitment to our nation's future. And actually, Chairman Molinar and I just met with Condoleezza Rice yesterday of Stanford, who heads the Hoover Institution, who brought a number of researchers to our office to talk to us about the technology competition and the fact that the only way that we are going to win this competition is for the federal government to invest in basic research and development, supplemented by these additional investments in SBIR and STTR, which build upon progress, the blue sky research in the private and public sector. I just want to say thank you so much, Chairman Roger, and thank you, Chairwoman Velasquez and Chair John Molinar, for your leadership, your partnership, your collaboration. Together, we are going to win this competition, this strategic competition against the CCP. Thank you, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Thank you for that. And I will now introduce our witnesses. Our first witness here with us today is Dr. Bill Marinelli. Dr. Marinelli is the President and CEO of Physical Sciences, Inc., located in Andover, Massachusetts. Dr. Marinelli joined Physical Services in 1983 and has been involved as a scientist and program manager in a diverse range of technical areas. In 2006, he was named Executive Vice President for Defense Systems. In 2018, he became Chief Operating Officer for the company and was named to the Board of Directors in 2021. Dr. Marinelli then assumed the title of President and CEO in 2022. Dr. Marinelli has made numerous contributions in the fields of chemical kinetics, gas service interactions, space physics, and advanced diagnostics. Dr. Marinelli received his MS and PhD degrees in physical chemistry from the University of California at Berkeley. He is also a graduate of Brown University, where he earned a degree in chemistry. I want to thank you for being with us today. Looking forward to your conversation. Our next witness here with us today is Ms. M.L. Mackey. Ms. Mackey is the CEO of Beacon Interactive Systems, located in Waltham, Massachusetts. Ms. Mackey has co-founded Beacon Interactive in 1994, and along with her partner, has grown the business into a valued non-traditional defense contractor. And throughout her time, Ms. Mackey has won multiple awards, such as the West Leadership Award, the Tibbetts Award, Small Business Executive of the Year, Small Business Advocate of the Year, and Champion of Small Business Innovation. Ms. Mackey serves as the ex-com of NDIA's board and is the chair of the Small Business Division. She is past chair of NSBA and a current member of SBA's Innovation Advisory Committee in the National Academies of Sciences, Army, and S&T Roundtable. Ms. Mackey is a graduate of Lehigh University with a Bachelor of Science in Electrical Engineering. I want to thank you for being here also today. Our next witness here today is Mr. Cyrus Miryekta. Mr. Miryekta is the founder and CEO of Ravelin, U.S., located in Fairfax, Virginia. Mr. Miryekta founded Ravelin in 2023 to serve as a strategic consulting firm for the USG Inclined Innovators, and prior to Ravelin, he was with the Air Force Office of Special Investigations and spearheaded the Department of Defense counterintelligence in Silicon Valley. He enlisted in the U.S. Army in 2000 and served as an airborne fire team leader in Afghanistan and in Iraq, where he was decorated for actions under fire and for saving a civilian from an IED. He serves as board member for the Black Star Orbital and Tiger Cat Cyber, as well as board advisor for Terra Space. He also has worked as a volunteer to set up medical clinics in rural Guatemala, where over 1,000 children have been treated a week. He holds a Master of Arts degree in Statecraft and National Security from the Institute of World Politics. He is also a graduate of the National Security Institute, Space Institute, and California State University, where he received a bachelor's degree in political science and government. I want to thank you for being with us today, and I'm looking forward to all of the testimony. And I now recognize our ranking member from New York, Ms. Velasquez, to introduce our last witness appearing before us today.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Our final witness today is Mr. Jere Glover, the Executive Director of the Small Business Technology Council, a trade association of small, high-tech companies, most of whom are involved in the Small Business Innovation Research Program. As counsel to this House Small Business Committee, he directed and organized a set of hearings on small business and innovation that laid the groundwork for the program in 1978. Throughout the law's existence, he has been one of its most active supporters. Mr. Glover has a unique blend of public and private sector experience. For more than 6 years, he was the federal government's lead defender of small businesses in the regulatory process. In the private sector, he has been the CEO or principal of a biotech company, a medical technology company, and a group of medical clinics. He obtained his undergraduate and law degrees from the University of Memphis and an LLM in administrative law and economic regulation from George Washington University. Thank you, Jere. We look forward to your testimony. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
The lady yields back. Before recognizing the witnesses, I would like to remind them that oral testimony is restricted to 5 minutes in length. If you go over 5 minutes, you hear the gavel a little bit, and you need to bring it to a close. If you see the light turn red in front of you, it means your 5 minutes has concluded, and you should wrap it up quickly. Also, I'd like to add, periodically you will see some of us moving in and out. It's no reference on your testimony or anything, but some will have other places that got to be real quick and come back. You may see the ranking member or myself do that, but we will be back, okay? So that means nothing. So I now recognize Mr. Marinelli for his 5-minute opening remarks.
Good morning, Chairman Williams, Ranking Member Velasquez, and members of the House Committee on Small Business. It's an honor to testify here today on behalf of Physical Sciences Incorporated, a small business headquartered in Andover, Massachusetts. I want to thank you for the opportunity to talk about our experience with the SBIR program. Our company was founded in 1973 with a mission to develop technical solutions for national priorities in defense, security, energy, environmental, healthcare, and industrial markets. The company is 100% owned by an employee stock ownership trust, has no foreign ownership interest, and takes active measures to prevent foreign technology transfer. Our company embraces the key intent of the SBIR legislation to meet federal research and development needs while identifying commercial applications for those highly specialized technologies. 4 examples include: 1, advanced lithium-ion battery technology to support 2 Navy programs of record where their operational requirements exceed commercial standards. 2, rare earth extraction from coal ash to provide a secure domestic supply of these critical elements. We developed and patented that technology under SBIR and non-SBIR programs. And funding for a $30 million pilot plant has now been awarded to Pennsylvania's Winter Water Systems in conjunction with the Southern Company. Radiation detection technology to secure our borders against trafficking in this threat. The technology we manufacture currently provides detection capability to several ports of entry along the southern United States, as well as to federal, state, and local law enforcement agencies in the U.S., the U.K., and select overseas locations. And finally, remote natural gas leak detection technology developed for use by the natural gas industry. Over 7,400 of those systems have been sold under license to PSI. I think the key point is that component technology funded by SBIR awards from multiple agencies and facilitated by significant investments by PSI in facilities and select capabilities was employed to meet these needs. We have reported over $677 million in Phase 3 economic activity to the SBA, about half of which is actual commercial sales from licensed technology by our partners. Only $5.8 million of those funds are formally listed as Phase 3 awards, illustrating the erroneous and misleading conclusions that can be drawn by simplistic studies that purport to capture the program's total economic activity. In looking at reauthorization, we believe the primary SBIR reauthorization challenges is to reduce barriers to entry and not restrict program participation. Reauthorization should reinforce 5 basic principles, and I think you've heard some of them already today. First, merit-based awards. Congress should maintain the competitive, merit-based fundamentals of the program to ensure that the best technology is developed. The GAO review of the program showed that there were no SBIR mills and that the intent of the program is being met. There should be no arbitrary award caps, submission limits, or forced graduation. Second, agency discretion. Agencies should have the discretion to shape the program and define merit consistent with their missions. Multi-award winners should not be penalized for some agencies' lower rate of adoption and commercial potential. 3, improved communication. Agencies should improve the communication of their needs and opportunities across all topic types to enable companies to tailor their proposals to meet those specific needs, improve their potential for award, and support subsequent technology transition. 4, application simplification. The largest barrier to participation in the program for new entrants is increased administrative burden and complexity of proposal submission. Per capita proposal submission rates from underserved regions of the country are some of the lowest in the program, reflecting those barriers. And finally, permanent authorization. The GAO identified investments in dedicated capabilities as key to receiving DoD awards and to being viewed as a reliable supplier by our customers. Program permanency reduces the concern that those investments will be stranded at the next reauthorization without limiting the ability of Congress to make further adjustments to the program. In conclusion, there are many pathways for commercial success. The U.S. government should be open to innovation from all small business sources and not limit participation to certain pathways. Doing so would undermine the ability to secure the very best technology for its priorities. Thank you very much.
Gentleman yields back, and Ms. Mackey, you have 5 minutes.
Chairman Williams, Ranking Member Velasquez, and distinguished members of the committee, thank you for inviting me to speak today on the importance of the SBIR STTR programs. My name is M.L. Mackey. I'm the CEO of Beacon Interactive Systems, a non-traditional and unconventional defense contractor delivering innovative, efficiency-improving digital capabilities to our military services. I'm here today in my capacity as the chair of the Small Business Division of the National Defense Industrial Association, NDIA. I also serve on the executive committee of NDIA's National Board of Directors. For over 100 years, NDIA has provided a forum for government and industry leaders to collaborate and address complex defense issues. NDIA and its affiliates represent over 1,700 defense companies of all sizes and sectors, the majority of which are small business. NDIA has been a long-standing and vocal supporter of the SBIR and STTR programs and regards these programs as some of the nation's most effective tools in bringing cost-effective and valuable innovations to the DoD. We appreciate your leadership in extending the programs through September 30th, 2025, and we strongly endorse your efforts to further extend the programs before the current authorization expires. The SBIR STTR programs facilitate and effectively streamline the participation of competitive small businesses to work on agency-specific research and development needs. Speeding innovations and advanced capabilities to our warfighters is critical to the DoD's efforts to outpace the People's Republic of China and other potential competitors in this era of great power competition. In my own personal experience as the CEO of Beacon Interactive Systems, we found the SBIR program to be a gateway by which we could enter the defense marketplace. We have delivered multiple programs of record, deployed systems across 200-plus ships, submarines, and carriers, and multiple shore-based locations worldwide. Our digital products transform operations at the edge. In one example alone, early estimates predict our Flightline platform will save an hour and a half per maintainer per shift. This tremendous impact on operational capacity was critically nurtured with SBIR investment. Based on this positive experience and similar experiences from my colleagues in NDI's Small Business Division, we offer the following 3 areas for review to enhance the SBIR STTR programs. Our first recommendation, the SBIR STTR program should be permanently authorized. These programs inspire technical innovation and inject a vital sense of entrepreneurship into the defense enterprise. Establishing them permanently is the next logical step. SBIR and STTR are an essential part of America's innovative high-tech ecosystem, and even the threat of a short-term disruption can severely affect smaller high-tech innovators. The temporary nature of the current programs also does not signal stability to both the federal agencies who administer them and the small businesses seeking to participate in these programs. Our second recommendation is to provide more support for Phase 3 awards and transition to commercialization. In line with the SBIR Policy Directive, SBIR, I always use the slang. In line with the SBIR Policy Directive, the government is required to the greatest extent practicable to award follow-on efforts to the SBIR investments already made in the capability. This is both an efficient use of federal funding and a significant incentive for new entrants to the U.S. defense industrial base. Attracting and retaining new companies that can rapidly deliver innovative technologies and capabilities to the warfighter is a critical element to building a modern, diverse, and resilient U.S. defense industrial base. The technologies these companies deliver can also provide the decisive advantage needed to deter or win a fight. DoD acquisition programs should review prior SBIR STTR projects and assess opportunities to utilize these investments. If the federal government already has access to an existing technology that is purpose-built, meets the competitive threshold, and addresses the requirement, it should not expend additional funds to procure and then duplicate the same technology. Besides saving money, this review would also save time, as the DoD can leverage the agile authorities of SBIR Phase 3 contracting to acquire those technologies and deliver to the warfighter sooner. It would be a disservice, I think, to my colleagues if I inadvertently contributed to the perceived SBIR issue of vendor lock here. So I want to talk about how important it is that the SBIR Policy Directive says to the greatest extent practicable, and if it's not practical, tell us why. Document it so that we know, we as the small businesses know how to improve, and we as taxpayers know that you have looked for what you already have on the shelf. The third recommendation that we have is to increase agency oversight of implementation and agency employee accountability. In my submitted written testimony, we have a fair amount of detail on what kind of training we think would help with that. But in conclusion today, I want to first applaud this committee for your vigilance in promoting small business-friendly policies. Your work to defend deliberate and efficient approaches to include small business high-tech innovators in the U.S. defense industrial base is a valuable proposition for the government and a direct enabler of innovation growth and growth. I appreciate the opportunity to be here today, and I welcome any of your questions.
Lady yields back. I now recognize Mr. Miryekta for his 5-minute opening remarks.
Chairman Williams, Ranking Member Velasquez, distinguished members of the committee, thank you for having me here today. I'm here to discuss the Chinese Communist Party's exploitation of American innovation with a focus on SBIR programs. Historically, America has had 3 offset strategies, and an offset strategy is a strategy to defeat a military peer should deterrence fail. The first offset strategy was nuclear weapons. 1949, Soviets test their first bomb. We lose that edge almost as quickly as we got it. The second offset strategy was net warfare, which we revealed to the world in Gulf Storm in '91, where we interlinked air, land, sea, and space forces for precision strikes. If you read modern Chinese and Russian strategies today, you'll see it's largely predicated on what they saw in 1991. Fast forward to the present, it's why Russian electronic warfare is so effective in the Ukraine. They spent 40 years mastering this asymmetrical capability. The SBIR program has an outsized impact for the third offset strategy, which is the rapid incorporation of innovation into the Department of Defense to defeat a peer adversary. Innovators in America are largely people in their late 20s, early 30s, known for their irreverence and informal apparel, and they have become the vanguard of our fight with the CCP. I've had the honor of serving my country for 16 years, first as a paratrooper in Afghanistan and Fallujah, Iraq. I went to university on the Montgomery GI Bill. I infiltrated a closed career fair to join the intelligence community. I volunteered for an assignment in Central California in 2014 when I realized DoD had no counterintelligence support to its equities in Silicon Valley. For nearly a decade, I provided counterintelligence support to startups, Fortune 50 companies, FPGA design houses, and academic institutions. I set up the counterintelligence programs at Defense Innovation Unit Experimental at the time, AFWorks, and SpaceWorks. For my impact to U.S. national security, I've been awarded an unprecedented 9 national intelligence awards. And while I'm not here to talk about my government service, this legacy informs the company that I run today, which is an advisory firm called Ravelin US. We specialize in helping U.S. innovators identify foreign ownership, control, and influence issues, and then how to mitigate and/or remove them. The Chinese Communist Party has also evolved in its tactics against the United States. I've witnessed this over the last 12 years. There's this misconception that cyber exploitation vastly outweighs human exploitation, which couldn't be more wrong. Human collections, the exploitation of our people and systems, is far more ubiquitous than what we face in the cyber realm. The CCP will use real relationships curated over a decade. I had one last week that was 10 years before they ever deployed capital into the innovator's company. We will also see the CCP investors and their affiliates investing in SBIR recipients who struggle to go from phase 1 to phase 2. There is a grooming process, and it's like slow boiling the target. There's no official signing up to become an asset. It is a gradual process that occurs over time. We also see American investors who are investing in genocide-enabling technologies in the against the Uyghurs in the Xinjiang province. Those same investors will be investing in munitions innovators that have received SBIRs on U.S. soil. When the Chinese Communist Party wants an innovative capability, they'll often work through proxies. Sometimes that means allied countries, usually through U.S. citizens. And when they have a capability that they want us to deny ourselves, they will loudly deploy Chinese Communist Party affiliated capital, knowing that our due diligence systems will find it, we will identify it, and we will not use the capability as a department. It takes a nuanced eye to identify and to remove, but you have essentially a poison pill of CCP investment in our systems. This is not really the worst thing. In fact, if your adversary is forced to adjust their tactics and deal with your strategy, that means you're having an impact. And right now, we are far ahead of them, and we need to intensify our efforts. The impact of the SBIR program vastly outweighs the dollar amount, and it steers the industry. The SBIR Extension Act that went into effect in July of 23 has changed the American innovative landscape. Not all of the due diligence teams that are required to do the FOCI due diligence are the same. In fact, you have one team that's better than all the other teams combined and still way out far ahead. But we cannot look at specific teams and say whether the program is working or not. It's actually quantifiable, and we can figure that out. Well, you do have some recommendations for the committee. I know I have a very cumbersome last name, and I would encourage you to call me Cyrus. The SBIR program is critical to executing our third offset strategy, which is to ensure American hegemony in the 21st century. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Cyrus. And now, Mr. Glover, you have your 5-minute opening remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Velasquez, members of the committee. It's an honor to be here today to talk about reauthorization of the SBIR, STTR programs. Today, I want to share with you a remarkable congressional and government story. 47 years ago, this committee, together with the Senate, held joint hearings on small business and innovation. The committee found that small business was by far the most innovative sector of the U.S. economy, creating 2/3 of all major inventions, but that virtually none of the federal R&D dollars went to small business. It was almost impossible for a small business to get government R&D contracts. The contracting officers are much more comfortable giving R&D contracts to large businesses. Even today, the largest prime contractor at DoD receives 10 times more than the entire SBIR program in funding. The Small Business Committee asked common sense questions. How can the government get better R&D by asking the most innovative and entrepreneurial sector of America to do it? And how can this make America stronger? The answer was the SBIR program, and Congress enacted it to unleash the ingenuity and drive of small business on America's technology challenges. Today, the SBIR program is the best government R&D program in the world and one of the most significant pieces of legislation ever passed. What are the results for the taxpayers' investment in SBIR? Thousands of new innovative firms and thousands of success stories, including technologies used today, such as Bluetooth, cell phones, electric cameras, GPS on a chip, thousands of medical breakthroughs, drones, all solutions that small business created and took to the marketplace. Here are some of the highlights. SBIR generates $2.50 for every dollar in tax income at state and federal levels from every dollar at DOD, and $3.68 for every dollar spent at the National Cancer Institute. Return on investment is 22 to 33% for every SBIR dollar, depending on the agency. Over 2,000 SBIR firms have been acquired, injecting innovations into larger companies. 99 new drug approvals in the last 20 years. 12% of all new drug approvals companies had funding from the SBIR program. 16% of the priority drugs had approval. 24,000 510Ks or pre-marketing approvals had SBIR involved. 10% of all venture capital funds go to SBIR programs. The SBA and agency website lists literally hundreds of other SBIR success stories. The program focused on merit, with agencies selecting the best solutions, keeps quality high and competition tough. Only 1 in 20 proposals get to phase 2. In 2017, GSA began writing contracts for other agencies, SBIR contracts. This was a major breakthrough. 5 years later, GSA actions doubled the SBIR phase 3 identified contracts from $1.5 billion to $3.5 billion. Their proposed IP3 program, which is pending, would make a great success story. When we look at China today, unfortunately, China leads in 57 of 64 critical technologies. U.S. is even behind Europe. Europe spends 20% on its small businesses, twice what the U.S. spends. Congress can take a number of actions to build on these successes. One, require better streamlining and simplification of the process, keeping merit-based to ensure the program continues to fund the best research. Double the SBIR program, leveraging small businesses to provide innovations to solve federal challenges. DOD's Section 809 panel and the past Secretary of Defense recommended doubling the allocation. Restore the 174 tax deduction. That's critical for not only SBIR companies, but all small innovative businesses. Reverse the slowdown of contracts and grant selections and awards, which may be fatal to many small firms. Cash flow kills startups. Make the SBIR program permanent, and these actions will help America regain its leadership in the world of innovation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Glover. We'll now move on to the member questions under the 5-minute rule. I recognize myself for 5 minutes. Dr. Marinelli, the SBIR and STTR programs were created to support small business growth while helping federal agencies fulfill those needs. My question is, as a small business owner myself and yourself, how important is it to ensure that the SBIR program remains merit-based, as we talked about?
Mr. Chairman, last September I had the privilege to visit 4 of the 5 landing beaches at Normandy. Sat on a German reinforcement and looked at the Omaha beach. I went to the American Cemetery afterwards and happened to visit the grave of someone important to my wife's family. It was truly a sobering experience. Cyrus talked about the second offset. That battle was a force-on-force in Normandy. We were able to kick Iraqi forces out of Kuwait in a week because of the second offset. It's American technology that is going to give us the third offset. My father actually fought in the Korean War as an artillery officer. We need to not have to fight those kinds of battles ever again. We need to get the best technology from the best sources, no matter where they are, anywhere in the country, to establish and maintain that third offset. Otherwise, we're going to wind up fighting these battles in a way that we don't want. We want to be able to deter foreign forces from ever starting a fight like that, and we want to make sure we can win it if it does start. So I think it's very important for our nation's security to make sure that merit is driving technology into our armed forces and everywhere else in the U.S. government.
Thank you. Ms. Mackey, the Valley of Death has been a challenge for small businesses in the SBIR STTR programs. This is when an innovation moves from the R&D stage into production. But small businesses lack access to capital, we've talked about that, to commercialize their product. In your written testimony, you mentioned that the DOD and other agencies should buy existing SBIR, STTR technologies, particularly during Phase 3 transition to commercialization. So can you explain how the agencies could more effectively integrate SBIR-funded innovations into the procurement process, and how this might save both time and money in the development of new technologies?
Thank you for the question. I think we don't have to do new legislation. I don't think we need to come up with how to do this. We need to make sure that it gets done. And we need to insert into the acquisition process the step of reviewing what do we have. And to be fair, there's a lot that we have. So even a good due diligence of what we have available and documenting that that has happened, we need to change behavior and the acquisition programs so that they look for components that they can successfully insert into their larger programs. I think this does what you were talking about in terms of bringing innovation forward and making things faster. It also helps address a lot of the adversarial impact that we have. If you have a company that is developing good technology and you have a reasonable path forward, you're less likely to take global investment that may have competitive interests.
Okay, I've got a limited amount of time, and Cyrus, as you know, there's a growing concern that the CCP is leveraging various mechanisms such as talent recruitment programs, the U.S. patent system, and venture capital investments to access sensitive IP developed through SBIR-funded research. So in your experience, how is China specifically acquiring IP from the SBIR-funded small business, and what are the primary methods you have observed being used to exploit these small businesses?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So when it comes to venture capital, we'll see investment post receipt of a SBIR. That's one of the methods. Another is working through U.S. firms. So it will be a U.S. firm without linguistic or cultural ties to China. They will mobilize them through money. We've seen this also with the Canadians, where they will use a Canadian to be an investor, but when you look at the Canadians' LPs, it all comes from one CCP fund, and then that individual is trying to oust the CEO of a company and move that technology to China. And this is all done, it's bankrolled by the Chinese Communist Party. They did it once successfully with a biotech company, and now they were trying to do it with an aerospace company. And so working through allies, working through third parties, trying to obfuscate their hand because they know that we are looking for it, and then also working through U.S. citizens, whether they're ethnically Chinese or otherwise. I yield my time.
Gentleman yields his time back, and I now recognize the ranking member for 5 minutes of questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for your testimony. Mr. Glover, one of the most important legislative tasks of this committee this year is to reauthorize the SBIR and STTR programs. Why is it important to make these programs permanent?
Because
Very briefly, please. Yeah.
Because every time this stop and start, the government starts shutting down, there's delays. Whenever there's a delay in awarding a contract, small businesses fail. They simply don't have the cash flow to carry them over to the next one. So every time this happens, it slows down the government, makes the government less efficient, but it also gives small businesses, sometimes the valley of death just gets so long they can't survive. And so the stop and starting is just very bad for the program.
Thank you. And to the panel, yes or no, do you agree that we should make SBIR, STTR permanent?
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Mackey?
Yes, definitely.
Yes, ma'am.
Ira?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Glover, in your testimony, you focus on the overwhelming success of the programs, yet for many years, they have only accounted for a sliver of federal R&D funding. Is it time for Congress to consider significantly expand agency allocations for the SBIR and STTR programs?
It is. When we look at Europe, they're doing twice as much as we are. When we look, and they're getting ahead of us in critical technologies. It's the most effective program going. Yes, it's time to make it better and bigger and more efficient.
Thank you. Ms. Mackey, your company has been successful in transitioning early-stage technologies into programs of record at the Department of Defense. As we focus on prioritizing commercialization, what can we do to improve the process for earlier-stage awardees?
I think for earlier stage awardees, we could improve the process by, specifically in the Department of Defense, exposing them to actual warfighters and getting the real feedback into what they're building. I also think that we could change the process to add the responsibility and the credit for transition to not only the small business, but the extended government team that also has to work with them, and other industry partners.
Thank you. Mr. Marinelli, some of the firms in the SBIR programs have come under fire for having lowered transition rates. Can you explain why it may not be beneficial to the DoD to arbitrarily use transition rates to measure success?
So, Congressman Velasquez, one of the things that we tend to work on is insertion of component technology into large platforms that take a decade to evolve and last for many years. That's a very slow process. Program managers are accepting a lot of risk to try and insert new technology into those programs. And often they are budgeted years in the future with very strict requirements. And so it's very difficult often to insert that technology. We have to work very hard in order to do that. And often it doesn't happen. Sometimes programs get canceled in midstream. And I think those are the issues. It's just, it's a very hard business basically to be in.
Thank you. Mr. Glover, the SBIR and STTR programs have grown significantly over the years, now accounting for nearly $5 billion in the federal budget. Yet, at the same time, the Small Business Administration, whose responsibility it is to administer the program, has not seen a similar increase in funds. Can you explain why we should find ways to bring the SBA more funding for program administration?
The SBIR program is now one of the biggest programs administered by SBA. When it first started, there were 17 employees in the overseeing SBIR. I think there's 3 now. It is in dire need of, it can't do everything, and it can't oversee and make sure the agencies do much more in phase 3s and follow on and provide that. So it is critical that we bring it in balance. You look at some of the other programs at SBA, they're much better staffed. For some reason, this has always sort of been a stepchild.
Thank you. Thank you. I yield back.
Yields back. I now recognize Mr. Stauber from the great state of Minnesota for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Williams and Ranking Member Velasquez, for holding this important hearing today, and thank you to our witnesses for taking time to share your expertise to us. You know, the United States government relies on innovative solutions to meet mission-critical demands, and small businesses play a pivotal role in that process. Many small businesses rely on the SBIR and STTR programs to bring their ideas from concept to reality, strengthening our national security and creating high-quality jobs. We've heard from small businesses that while SBIR funding is invaluable, the path from research to commercialization remains difficult. Many companies struggle to secure private investment or navigate federal procurement processes to bring their innovations to market. If these small businesses cannot transition successfully, we do risk losing key technologies to bureaucratic hurdles or worse, foreign competitors. Dr. Marinelli, your company has successfully navigated the SBIR program. What improvements would you like to see in the SBIR program to ensure continued innovation and successful commercialization?
So I think the most important thing that we can do for all companies involved is to improve communication of the federal government's needs to the various performers that are performing on the program. It's pretty critical there. A lot of new entrants don't know what's happening, and if they hear from program officers what's needed, they can tailor their proposals in order to meet those program officers' needs.
How do you get to the needs right now? How are you aware of the needs?
So earlier in my career, it used to be that the acquisition organizations and the S&T organizations would have briefings for industry. The Joint Program Office for Chem Biodefense in DTRA would, and they would stand up and tell you, here's what we need to acquire, here's where the S&T focus is to do that. That was enormously informative to me, and actually I brought that back to our company. It's one of the reasons we've grown. I think we need to see more of that throughout the federal government to let people know what is needed by the organizations.
Right. Thank you. One of the most alarming threats to American innovation is the growing evidence that China is actively working to exploit SBIR-funded research. We've seen reports of Chinese firms using venture capital investments, research partnerships, and talent recruitment programs to siphon technology developed with U.S. taxpayer dollars, just as Representative Molinaro stated. If we do not take stronger measures, we risk unintentionally fueling China's military and economic ambitions at the expense of our own national security. Mr. Miryekta, how is China leveraging venture capital investments in SBIR-funded companies to gain access to sensitive technology, and what steps can Congress do to prevent this?
By the virtue of innovators, the way the companies are set up, nothing is classified yet. So it's very easy if a CCP-affiliated investor puts even a tiny amount of capital in, not just as the investor themselves, but even as one of the limited partners. The fact that they have any affiliation or access to the company means that they can start collecting on the people in it. And there was an example brought up by the ranking member of the Committee on Chinese Communist Party earlier, which was American Superconductor Corporation, where exactly that happened. All they needed was access to the company personnel. Then it goes to a department in the PLA that does target packages, finds out who has access, who's the most vulnerable, whose vices aren't in check, and then they send PLA2, which is Chinese Communist James Bond. They go in and they flip the target and are able to extract what it is that they're looking for. But by virtue of just having access to the individuals, some of the companies we see are targeted through Cold War era tactics, break-ins, and we mean like 11 cars are broken into, 7 laptops are stolen, all for a new energy company. Their executives' travel is all marked and prepared for when they arrive. So it's everything from grooming the target, and it's very pleasant, to old-style legal activity.
As President Trump says, they're ripping us off, and it's unacceptable. The SBIR, STTR programs are critical to ensuring small businesses remain the driving force of American innovation. However, we must continue strengthening them by reducing bureaucratic barriers, enhancing security protections, and improving pathways to commercialization. This is about maintaining our competitive edge while safeguarding taxpayer investments. And I look forward to working with my colleagues to ensure these programs continue to serve America's best interests. Mr. Chair, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. I now recognize Mr. McGarvey from the great state of Kentucky for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And this is something that we've seen firsthand in my district for a long time. I want to talk a second about part of my district in Louisville called Rubbertown. And this really came from in the war, in World War II. In the 1940s, we noticed a severe lack of synthetic rubber available to our troops and located massive factories in Louisville, Kentucky, where almost all of the synthetic rubber used during the war came from a small neighborhood right there on the Ohio River. Throughout that war, we saw synthetic rubber, nuclear fission, radar, cryptography, so many other technologies that were highly classified. And classified advancements, like those that came out of SBIR and STTR programs today, are much more difficult to patent due to their sensitive nature. And we know exactly what we knew during World War II, that we are in a strategic power competition with adversaries overseas. In 2021, the U.S. National Security Commission for Artificial Intelligence reported to Congress and the President that for the first time since World War II, America's technological dominance, the backbone of our economic and military power, is under threat. Ms. Mackey, you stated that innovation is critical to DoD's efforts to outpace China and other near-peer competitors, but we also know that contracting at DoD can be especially difficult for small businesses. Can Congress improve how the SBIR program provides a pathway for small businesses into government or provides on-ramps to grow?
Yeah, I think I'd answer that with two statements. The first is absolutely we can do more to make sure that there's a consistency in how we engage with component tech insertion of innovation into the contracting process. The second piece that I'd put out is this whole infusion of capital, is really important to high-tech innovators, to small business startups. I love this trusted capital initiative we had for a while. I think it's really important. My oldest is starting a business, and as she is very interested in getting VC from American capital, it's not easy to figure out what's what. So I think one of the things we can do is help with the contracting, and I think we can also help with the Department of Defense articulating who is trusted capital and how do you know how to engage with trusted capital.
And just on those capital guidelines, what would you recommend along that front specifically?
I would recommend a lot of the work that the SBA and Office of Strategic Capital just finished around how do you identify investors that are American-owned and intend to stay American-owned. And I think probably Cyrus could give you some more specific examples on that. But from an industry perspective, as a small business owner, that would be so helpful. Even as a mature business owner, it would be helpful to me. But as a startup, it would be really helpful.
Yeah, because if you're starting up, it's difficult to untangle all that yourself, and then of course you.
I'm just saying, there's a few things you're thinking about, right?
Yeah, just there's a few things going on. Just thank you, I appreciate that a lot. Mr. Glover, I want to ask you a question. The current administration is targeting budget cuts for agencies like NIH and the NSF, who host these SBIR programs. Would these cuts make it possible to fund the necessary security advancements we need to combat the IP theft we're talking about today?
It will be a significant problem. We have led the world in innovation because we've spent money on it. But other countries are now spending more money proportionally than we are. Even France has a program to fund transition technologies. We're getting left out. And if we take a serious step back on that, not only will health and safety be a challenge, but also our defenses will not be as strong and sufficient. Research needs continuity, it needs consistency, and when you make it erratic and uncertain, then you lose a generation of people who simply decide that the U.S. is not the place to develop their technology. We've got lots of people who've come to America to develop their technology, and you just look around, you find them everywhere. Yeah. And if we lose that leadership role, it will be a long term. And cutting things right now and making it erratic, just delaying contracts for months. When you don't have the cash flow, we're going to lose companies, and those companies won't come back.
No,
or they'll turn somewhere else to get the money.
Yeah, and I think when you talk about us spending less, that's really important. I would say also investing less, because there is a return on investment for what we're talking about here, both in the economic impact it has in our country and, of course, on the strategic importance that it maintains over our adversaries. I am nearly out of time, but I think I do want to point that innovation, that investment in innovation is paramount to our success as a nation. And the SBIR and STTR programs are core to that American innovation. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
And now I recognize Mr. Alford from the great state of Missouri for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Ranking Member Velasquez, for holding this important hearing today, and thank you all for being here on your own time and own dime. I appreciate you coming in. Today's hearing is focused on the SBIR and STTR programs, two of the most important public-private partnership programs Congress authorizes. These programs help small businesses access capital, a vital issue that constrains growth. Additionally, these programs spur innovations, and American ingenuity is why our nation laps the world in new technologies, and these programs are a key pillar in supporting small businesses that create new products. While these programs are important to American innovation, the Chinese Communist Party also finds it important for their great innovation, stealing the intellectual property of Americans. According to a 2021 DoD study on SBIR programs, nearly all cases show that Communist China, not the U.S., is the ultimate beneficiary of DoD and other U.S. government research investments. With both SBIR and STTR's authorizations expiring in September this year, I look forward to working with my colleagues to make sure these programs remain pillars of American innovation. I want to start with you, Cyrus. Thanks for being here, and thank you for letting us call you Cyrus. What safeguards should this committee consider when reauthorizing this? I know you all have said it needs to be a permanent reauthorization to make sure that the influence, the espionage, and theft of intellectual property from the CCP is reduced, or if we could eliminate it, would be great.
We've already, just by Air Force and Space Force's actions alone, have changed the American innovation landscape. They realize that if they have CCP capital, even affiliated, they will be prohibited from doing work with the department until it's sanitized. The other branches of service and every agency that gives or awards SBIRs and STTRs should have a FOCI, or foreign ownership, control, and influence due diligence team that is as effective as what the Air Force has. Most agencies haven't even started building a team, and there are only really 4.5 functional teams, being generous, for who is actually doing the vetting. Once the innovators realize this is a real hurdle to reaching U.S. government funding, they will act immediately before they go to bed that night. Once they realize this is reality, they will change on a dime. Innovators know how to pivot, and they have to accept it as reality. The Cyber Extension Act has done that. NDAA 23 has done that. The Committee on the Chinese Communist Party has done that, and they've made it real for our innovation industry. One of the issues, though, with the due diligence teams is they are required, but no resources are provided. That's like asking the agency to give me everybody who doesn't have something real going on. And so this is a low priority mission.
Well, I'm also honored to be on the Appropriations Committee. I'm not on Defense, but I do know that this is important, and this investment, if you're talking about resources, to fund these programs that are going to root out these things are actually hurting America, hurting our innovation, and threatening our national security. So I'll be having a talk with the chair of Defense Approps, Mr. Calvert, about this and seeing what direction we could head right across the hall here. I want to talk with you a little bit more, Cyrus, about China, its influence in our universities. The University of Missouri, Kansas City was just in my office this week. They're trying to create a defense corridor. They have a SCIF even built on campus. They're working with drone programs, critical mineral processing, trying to make the Kansas City area and down into my district really a defense corridor. How should universities be looking now? Because the Chinese students are here. How did they get here in the first place? And then what safeguards should we put in place to make sure that espionage is not taking place?
The Chinese Student Scholar Associations are run out of the Chinese consulates all over the United States. When Chinese students used to come to America in the 90s and early 2000s, they would integrate with the U.S. population. They would have boyfriends and girlfriends who were American. They would fall in love with America, and they would go home with pro-American sentiments. Nowadays, Chinese students are kept in these little thought ghettos managed by the Chinese Student Scholar Associations. They are given weekend activities where they're indoctrinated. It's not far from Iran's Basij and how they do grassroots indoctrination. And we train them with the latest education, and then we send them home no more American than when they arrive.
And they're members of families that have favorable status with the CCP, if not CCP members outright, correct?
They have to be in good standing to come here,
yes.
sir.
Just a point of clarification, Whiteman Air Force Base, home of the B-2 stealth bomber, home of the B-21, soon the Raider, is 10.8 miles from the University of Central Missouri. They have a small number, 5 to 6 Chinese students. They say it's not a threat, but we have to be vigilant and aware without damaging the reputation of innocent people here to gain education. Thank you, and I yield back.
Chairman yields back. I now recognize Mr. Cisneros from the great state of California for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to all the witnesses for being here today. I'm going to get right to the questions. Mr. Glover, Politico reported that 20% of the SBA workforce will be cut by Mr. Musk and DOGE. Who knows what other cuts as far as financial may come along that way as well. Does threatening firing and forcing resignations of dedicated civil servants at the SBA and cutting their budget or at any agency that administers SBIR, STTR programs help small businesses, and how does it hurt the programs overall?
I had the privilege of working with Vice President Gore's Reinventing Government initiative in the Clinton administration. They cut 300,000 jobs, but they did it very carefully, and they looked at it very meticulously and took several years to do it. And they did bring down the expenditures. They did it carefully and wisely. We didn't hear screams or shouts from the employees being unfair. Terminating people with virtually no notice, not allowing them to plan, run their future, is a challenge. We see cuts that, without thinking about it, when you cut R&D budgets, you're going to end up getting less innovation. You're going to end up the inventors are going to look somewhere else for money. And as I've been told, they will look wherever they have. They spent their whole life developing this technology. If they can't get the money in the United States, they will get it somewhere else. So it is a real challenge, it is a real problem, and it should be done carefully and precisely.
Along that line as well, there's a company, a small business, that's doing some very innovative stuff around solar panels and making them more efficient. But the amounts that we're paying here, I believe it's like 50,000 phase one, 250,000 phase two, and then 750,000 later on. It's just over $1 million. They haven't really sought any of this funding to help them along the way because it's just not really sufficient enough, and they've had to get outside funding in order to help them and to do the innovation that they need to. So are these programs suited right? Are the amounts that we are paying right now, are they sufficient enough? Is there things that we need to look at to increase them to help innovate technology?
First of all,
to keep out
the amounts are 100 to 250,000. Some agencies have gone below that, like the Air Force, but everybody else is pretty much 100 to 250. And the follow-on funding can go up to $3 million if you do things right, and even higher than that with SBA-specific approval. We look at the balance, the situation of how do we fund, do we give more phase ones and early on awards and less phase twos? And what we've had is the National Academy of Sciences looking at this program, and they've looked at it to balance that, and they say we've got the balance about right. That was 4 years ago. We haven't looked at it recently, but there is some flexibility, so the agencies can go up or even down if they choose to. But by and large, it's if we can get phase three working right, like GSA did, we added $2 billion of phased, just because you changed the procedure of how you did contracting. And they've got an even better program on the shelf. We can make that huge difference in how that works.
All right, thank you. Ms. Mackey, Congress gave the United States Special Operations Command, SOCOM, a special authority in 2021 to do business-to-business transactions. In FY23, their average time to production decision from the initial topic enhancement to the award as follows: as in phase threes, developed from 5 years to 18 months. Now, while SOCOM's approach can't be used for all SBIR programs, how can we support agencies in moving innovations through this process faster than the current average timeline?
Yeah, that's a great example. I love what SOCOM did with that, and I think that when we look at this, we need to understand it's not the small business innovator, it's not the high-tech company that's slowing things down, it's the processes that we have in place. I think a first step would be to approximate some of what we did with SOCOM as a pilot program within the other SBIR programs, but it's not just within the SBIR program, and this is the point that I think is important for us to think about. It's within that R&D world that funds it, but it's also within the acquisition world that acquires it, that does the follow-on testing. So I think if we were to encourage pilots of two groups working together more effectively, the way SOCOM has the ability to bundle that together, you have an ability to get something over the valley of death because there's someone to receive it on the other side, and also to sort of build that bridge for you as you come over.
All right, I yield back. Thank you.
Gentleman yields back. I now recognize Mr. Muser from the great state of Pennsylvania for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to our witnesses. This is a very informative and important hearing. Appreciate it very much, you being here. Dr. Marinelli, you discussed your company's development of technology to extract rare earth minerals, critical components for satellites, data centers, and other technologies, super important, from coal ash piles. Love that. We got a little bit of coal ash up in my district, to say the least. We're working on it in this same manner. So the SBIR program has assisted you in developing this technology, and maybe you can expand on why you believe how it's helped you.
So this started out as a little idea experiment. We started as a kind of beaker scale laboratory type experiment to see if we could extract rare earths from coal ash. It turns out that technology is based on the same process that you use to extract uranium and plutonium. It was developed during the Second World War. We adapted it to this purpose. We received SBIR funding then to bring it to a larger scale and to work through some of the details of it, and finally went to DOE and DOD's IBAS program, where we were able to get funding to build a pilot plant actually at Winter Water Systems in Sharon, Pennsylvania.
Did they in Sharon, okay, great.
Yeah,
Did they
in
initially
Sharon.
find you, or did you find them?
We went out and found them, but we worked very closely with both DOD and DOE in that
The first
process.
time is easiest, right? Because once you have contact, it's far easier. Getting through is the most difficult part.
Certainly, but you've got to also show success.
Just like with anything.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then it turns out that Appalachian coal is actually rich in rare earths, is one of the things that we learned. And working with Senator Shelby before he retired, we were able to get an appropriation to build the next scale plant down in Alabama.
Okay, good. Well, contact me. We got, Schuylkill County, and we got the best anthracite, and we've got all those rare earths within our ash, so within our comb banks, and we've got
We're certainly willing to
we
move
got mountains
forward.
of those that we're working on excavating.
Sure.
Thanks. Mr. Miryekta. Well, first off, thank you for your service, sir. Appreciate you very much. So from your experience, your methods, your discussions on China, very serious, collecting sensitive IP from SBIR-funded small businesses. Now, this sounds like it's rampant. It sounds like it's targeted. It sounds like they're targeting SBIR potential businesses or the SBIR fund. Now, it's $100 million, right? That's a lot of money, but that's not enough to create a whole espionage ring. Is their main point not just accessing the money, but also accessing the mothership, if you will, that's doing the contracting?
So, to my knowledge, no. To my knowledge, they're very focused on the innovators. It's not the amount of money. Everybody is seeking SBIR-funded companies, U.S. investors, Chinese investors. The receipt of a SBIR tells the investor that there's a differentiator, whatever it is. It doesn't matter if they like the program or not, but this is a company that somebody in the government vetted. They believe it will be effective, so it attracts both good and bad investment. But that is for the technology itself, and we'll see a lot of early stage funding where a CCP investor will try to get in at the pre-seed stage, disseminate their cash across the board so they can find or keep an eye on most of the industry, and then you see what rises up, and that's what they'll focus on.
Okay. We had a reauthorization 2023. Maybe you could talk about some of the improvements. Did you like what was done? particularly from a foreign adversary security standpoint or just from an access standpoint, as well as it being better known by those who may benefit by this program?
This was a watershed event, sir, and thank you for asking about it. It legitimized the mission for keeping CCP investment out of our equities. It became real once it was codified, and because we had two laws, or another law and an executive order on top of it, and it takes about 2 years for the industry to accept it. But as of February of '24, they weren't certain if this was a real requirement. The denials became more publicized over the summer. By December of '24, our innovators are trying to get in front of it and make sure that they self-sanitize.
All right, thank you very much. I yield back, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all.
Gentleman yields back. I now recognize Mr. Tran from the great state of California for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Ranking Member. Thank you, and welcome to DC, to our witnesses. Mr. Glover, in your testimony, you rightly pointed out that America's basic science is a primary national strength, but converting that science to American innovation and job faces increasing international competition. Unfortunately, small businesses in SBIR, STTR programs face the threat of the Chinese Communist Party stealing their intellectual property and claiming these technological innovations for themselves. What role does SBIR, STTR program play in the American innovation ecosystem, and how does the SBIR, STTR program protect American innovation from issues like foreign ownership and patent theft?
Well, we started off when the founders created the SBIR program, we wanted to avoid having foreign countries benefit from this. So we put requirements in the law that said it has to be a U.S. company, it has to be owned by U.S. citizens, 51%, and work has to be done in America. Well, we thought we did enough. Well, we did for probably 30 years, but the last few years, obviously, the Chinese have outsmarted us and gone beyond that. So it is a challenge. But again, you've got to be careful not to simply say no when anything comes up with. And I think as Cyrus talked, you need to be able to fix the problems. And we found some of the agencies do not tell the company what the problem is, nor do they give it a chance to fix it. The Department of Defense, in their Undersecretary's memo, made it very clear that you have to tell them what the problem is and give them a chance to fix it. And unless you give them a chance to fix it, you're just shutting people down, and they can never learn, and they can never get better. So small business develops the technology. Study after study shows it. It shows how great the SBIR program is at developing it. We've got to make sure that we do stop the foreign use of it. It's not as common, but the problem is it's in critical areas. So like 99.9% of all SBIRs are just fine. But that 1/10 of 1% may be giving away whole generations of new technology, critical next generation of something significant. So it's a real challenge.
Thank you for sharing that. Ms. Mackey, DOD accounts for roughly half of the SBIR funding across the federal government, but concerns have been raised that the application process is daunting for many new businesses working to break into the space. In your experience, is DOD doing anything to make this process easier for first-time applicants?
I've seen a tremendous uptick in outreach efforts for first-time applicants. I will tell you, when we wrote our first proposal 20 years ago, it was a lot easier to write that first proposal. It was a lot easier to get started than it is now. I think we really need to focus on, have we overregulated that very first piece? All these issues notwithstanding, we need to make a funnel that can attract new entrants into it. So I'm seeing better outreach, and I think there's plenty of work we could still do.
Thank you. Mr. Glover, back to you real quick. The due diligence program to assess foreign risks has been successful in identifying risks already, but it can add another layer to an already complicated application process. I'm a big proponent of streamlining the SBIR and STTR programs while still protecting our research from foreign threats such as CCP, so entrepreneurs can focus on building new technologies and creating good-paying jobs. What changes can we make to enhance its effectiveness without creating an overly burdensome process for small businesses, particularly new applicants?
as someone who still remembers the Paperwork Reduction Act, which was a big deal years ago and sort of been ignored in recent history, it's a real challenge. And the first thing I think is quick and easy. Make model contracts and force every agency to say, when you get an award, here's your contract. There's no reason they can't do that right now. So that would simplify phase one. It would take months out of the cycle. Same thing for phase two, same thing for phase three. They do it with grants, but they don't do it with contracts. GSA proved that if you give a simple contract and you do it, they cut years out of the contracting process for phase threes. And they got a program to do even more that hopefully gets finalized very soon. But you come up with some basic ideas, but task the agencies to say, tell us why. There's a provision in the law that says report on standardization simplification. DOD just ignored it. Put some teeth in that and make them do it, but force the agencies to come up with the solutions. I can give you simple standard contracts with the award. That one saves time, energy, and effort. The proposal issue, that's a challenge because you have to somehow tell people what you want.
Thank you, Mr. Glover.
Yeah.
I truly appreciate it. I yield back, Chairman.
Gentleman yields back. I now recognize Mr. Downing from the great state of Montana for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you all for your testimony today. First of all, I'm deeply concerned by China's ongoing efforts to exploit the SBIR and the STTR programs to steal valuable U.S. intellectual property, and we need to protect these programs from subversion from our foreign adversaries. I'm going to start out, Mr. Miryekta. Thank you for being here today. China weaponizes talent recruitment programs like the 1,000 Talents Plan to gain access to deeply sensitive information from American companies and research institutions. First, can you give us an idea, in your estimation, of how effective these talent recruitment programs have been? And really how far they've advanced China's technological capacity compared to ours?
Yeah, I've seen, thank you for your question, Congressman. I've seen an individual that fled the PRC for having an active role during the Tiananmen Square massacre on June 4th, 1989. Fast forward 30 years, the United Front Work Department has won him over, and now, despite the success he found in America, he's helping the Chinese Communist Party from the United States. They're highly effective at recruiting expats on U.S. soil and in Europe.
So what types of technologies is China's talent programs and IP theft efforts specifically targeted?
It's literally the same as the Air Force Space Force requirements. It's, new space capabilities, new energy capabilities, AI, autonomy. Everything that we have as a priority is essentially seems to be mirrored by their priorities.
Do you believe that the SBIR and STTR currently have the protocols in place needed for mitigating the impact of China's talent recruitment strategy?
Only Department of the Air Force. They're the only ones capable.
Thank you. Thank you for those answers. I also want to discuss with you the impact of China's rapidly developing AI capabilities and the threat that it poses on our research security. We've obviously seen some pretty interesting things recently. To what degree have China's advancements in AI development bolstered their ability to subvert U.S. research programs, including SBIR?
When it comes to the Chinese, they spend billions on perception management, and they're constantly overselling their capability. However, oftentimes international actors become sympathetic to what the Chinese are broadcasting. That doesn't mean that their AI is on par or that it's actually legitimate with the story that they've given us.
Well, thank you very much. Clearly, we need to do more to protect the integrity of our federally funded research programs. And as the Small Business Committee develops the reauthorization of SBIR and STTR, I look forward to making research research security a top priority for this legislation. And so I thank you, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. I now recognize Ms. Skelton from the great state of Michigan for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, excuse me, as I fend off the last bit of this winter cold. Thank you so much for our witnesses for joining us here today for this incredibly important conversation. The SBIR program has been truly instrumental in supporting small businesses that drive technological innovation. I wanted to read just a little bit about the economic impact here, because that is essentially what we are talking about, right? What is the value of the dollars that we are investing in this critical program? Economic analysis of the program has routinely demonstrated its outsized importance in generating innovations and economic growth. Between 1996 and 2020, 99 new drug approvals, 12% of all new drugs approved, were developed by SBIR STTR firms. Another study found that SBIR Phase 2 awards show a return on investments between $22 and $33 for every dollar invested. It's incredible. A study from the National Cancer Institute found that for every dollar invested, it resulted in $11 in commercial sales. Throughout its lifetime, 829 SBI firms have gone public and 2,120 have been acquired. Finally, 10% of all venture capital investments go to SBIR firms. I like those numbers. Mr. Glover, the SBIR program is a game changer and critical for our economy. How can we ensure that this program continues to support cutting-edge research and development, especially in areas that are critical for U.S. competitiveness, such as health and national security?
One, I think we simply need to reauthorize it, make it permanent, put consistency into the program. Two, I think we need to have the program simplified and streamlined, and I think the government, GSA proved it can be done. So making the other agencies do it is something you can require in legislation and monitor and make sure that happens. And I think, quite frankly, the program needs to be a lot larger. It's something that this efficient is still at the 3%, hasn't been increased since 2011. If you know, you should reward something that works, and we haven't in what, 13 years, 14 years.
And I don't see us going in that direction right now. In fact, we recently heard, staff recently heard from an SBIR recipient who was unable to access funding during the federal funding freeze enacted by Donald Trump and Elon Musk several weeks ago. Luckily, due to a court order, court intervention, right? The administration wanted to stop it, but we needed the judicial branch to step in. NSF reopened their funding portal. Can you explain how this type of uncertainty impacts SBIR recipients?
The thing small business needs most is cash, and they need money, and they go out of business when they don't have it. And they don't have they often mortgage their house to make their technology work. And so when you shut off the spigot, you basically say this technology will die, or it will get funded by somebody else. Mm-hmm. And we all have heard today how much China is out there looking for it, and that's only outside of the SBIR program. It was rampant. This is by no means the only place their Chinese are looking. So it's critical, and it's painful. Do you let somebody spend their whole life developing technology, get it to a level, and then they win, and then say, "Oh, sorry, we are not doing it today. We're not, and we don't know when we're doing it."
Doesn't seem like the chainsaw approach is working as intended in this particular context. National security depends on us being a little bit more precise here. One more thing, Mr. Glover, the tax cuts passed in Trump's first term actually increased taxes on research and development, making companies amortize their research expenditures over 5 years rather than all at once. Do you have any thoughts on how that has impacted SBIR firms who usually have no other form of income?
It either has bankrupted them or put into a bankrupt, in effect, state where they may not file bankruptcy, but they don't have any money to pay anything, you don't have money to continue. When you're faced with getting a $1 million grant and you got to pay taxes on $1 million, but Used to be, it was 20%. Now it's 100%. We're having a conference with a bunch of people on tomorrow afternoon with companies all over the country. It has been a horrible situation. I was told when it got passed, oh, don't worry, it's so important, there's no way it won't get extended. Well, guess what? Washington is Washington. It hasn't been extended.
Thank you. Thank you so much, sir. I really appreciate it. As a champion of fiscal responsibility, these programs are critical. I yield back.
Lady yields back, and now recognize Mr. Finstead from the great state of Minnesota for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Williams, and thank you for holding this important hearing today, and thank you to our witnesses for being here with us. The district I have the honor to represent in southern Minnesota is home to several innovative companies that provide cutting-edge products for the Department of Defense. I also serve on the House Armed Services Committee and am happy to be serving here on the Small Business Committee as well. And I've had the pleasure and the opportunity of touring many of these businesses in my district and have seen the incredible work that they have done and that they are doing with the funding they receive from the SBIR and the STTR programs. So I'm looking forward to the opportunity to work with my colleagues here on this committee and our expert witnesses to improve these important programs that help drive innovation and economic development across our nation and my district. So, Dr. Marinelli, as somebody who has had great success utilizing the SBIR program with the Department of Defense, maybe just a simple question, and you've touched on it a little bit, but just maybe kind of cut through the chase here. So what challenges do SBIR applicants face in the process, and what changes can we make to expand access for this program for entrepreneurs and small businesses across the country?
So typically in the SBIR program, you're looking at the companies trying to do technology push, often in concert with the S&T program managers in the federal government. And you've got on the other side acquisition pull, people working off requirements. And I think probably the most important thing to do is to get them working in closer concert. So there's a technology handoff there. You've really got to de-risk the technology to the point where someone who's got a $1 billion technology platform is willing to accept the risk of bringing that new technology in. That takes money and it takes time. So I think trying to make that match earlier in the program will help both the acquisition programs and make the companies themselves be more successful and perhaps attract that investment.
Well, as we work as a committee on the armed services to really strengthen our defense industrial base, it's now more important than ever that we make this process easier and more of an A to B than a to B to C to D, and throw in a couple pipe wrenches in the process and a stable full of lawyers. So I appreciate your advice there. Ms. Mackey, as past chair of the National Small Business Association, how difficult, again, maybe kind of cutting to the chase, how difficult is it for small business owners to understand the government's hoops and pipe wrenches and all of it that they have to go through in contracting and the SBIR opportunity, with the SBIR opportunities? How can we make it easier for these businesses to pursue these opportunities?
Boy, I can't emphasize enough what it was like the first time when we won an SBIR and someone came in to explain how the federal government works. And, I'm an electrical engineer. My partner's a Harvard Business School grad. We have some gray matter and we were just like, what is this system? How does it work? And every time you think you learn more, there's something more to learn. So here's what I will tell you from our experience that I think would be helpful to others. When we were able to get technology through, it was because of an extended team. I mean, the small business has to be good, the technology has to be good, but you have to have government counterparts that are, as Bill pointed out, willing to take the risk. We as an ecosystem need to celebrate those government counterparts that are willing to take the risk. And it's the acquisition folks and it's the test folks. We also had industry partners who are willing to help us understand and sort of mentor us, not in a formal mentor-protege relationship, but so I think what we need to do is celebrate the extended team, and I think we need to offer them the benefit of the work that they do to help make that move forward. I'd be happy to think of specific examples, but that's in general what I think would be good.
No, I appreciate that. Your lived experience through this process is very helpful to hear your story, but also, I want to continue this dialogue as we look at how we can improve the process. And really, again, I come from the Armed Services Committee approach of how do we strengthen the defense industrial base. and how do we get some of these small and mid-sized companies scattered throughout rural America to have a seat at the table and speak the same language that government speaks, and how do we make that easier, not harder? So thank you for your time and for being here. And Mr. Chairman, thank you, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. I now recognize Mr. Olszewski from the great state of Maryland for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to all of our witnesses today for your time and your testimony. I think that just want to reemphasize my colleague, Representative Skolton, and her point of ROI and why these programs are so important. So I look forward to working with Chairman Williams, Ranking Member Velasquez, and all of my colleagues here to prioritize, especially what you all, I think, have pointed out, is providing that certainty, making the program permanent, or at least more permanent in particular, in addition to some other changes. So thank you all for your recommendations today. You know, we know these have real-life impacts. I'm aware of at least 2 businesses in my district that are direct recipients of this program in SBIR, one of which is a woman-owned business in Baltimore County. And so I'm interested in also the long-term success, not only of the program, but also the diversification of those who are participating in the program. Perhaps, Mr. Marinelli, could you speak to us a little bit about enhancing the geographic and demographic diversity of the program? What can we do to bring in new applicants? What's the most effective way, in your mind, to meet that goal?
So if you go back and look at there was a 2014 National Academy study of the Department of Defense SBIR program, and it showed that some of the underserved states in the program have some of the lowest per capita submission rates of proposals in the country. And I think probably the most important thing to do in terms of diversifying participation is to get them introduced into the program, make it easier for them to get in. In some cases, we've seen is some of the states that have programs that help bring the program to small companies are doing much better. Most of the new companies tend to form around universities, and I think focusing on universities, regardless of where they are, is important in terms of kind of bringing them out and telling them, here's a way for you to get funding. Under the STTR program, we've sent, I believe, around $23 million in funds to universities all over the country associated with that. And I think that's another way to introduce them to the program, is to show them the benefits of that funding. And it also helps get the technology out, as well as start to create that workforce that you get on the defense side. So I think all of those would be important things to do.
That's great. I appreciate that. Anyone else want to weigh in? Ms. Mackey?
So when we started in the space, we didn't know anything about defense or federal, and I had the bonus of being in Boston, near companies like PSI that I could engage with and start to learn this piece. What struck me as I worked through this ecosystem and a lot with the National Small Business Association and with NDI's Small Business Division, small businesses help each other. Like, there's this tremendous collegial outreach that I watched a lot of what people refer to as the coastal companies helping other small businesses. I think we formalize that. That would be tremendous. I also think it's important that we help people that haven't submitted understand that they're valuable and that their experience would be valuable. You don't recognize yourself as valuable, or that you could even access this program.
That's great. I will yield back with that, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. Thank you all.
Gentleman yields his time back. I now recognize Ms. Goodlander from the great state of New Hampshire for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and really thank you to our witnesses for being here today. Dr. Martinelli, I wanted to begin with you. I'm very, especially happy you're here. You know, New Hampshire is home to PSI facility, and
Yes.
wanted to give you the opportunity to talk a little bit more about the important work that you're doing in my home state.
So we have what we call the Molecules to Motors program. We started out with SBIR-funded technology to create new propellants and new explosive materials and new components for that. There's only so much you can do in a laboratory. There are certain safety concerns associated with that, and we needed to find a place where we could scale up, so to speak. I actually identified a location in New Hampshire. I'm not going to talk about where it is because of the kind of things that we do there. But we've grown that now to a 13-acre campus where we can both mix large quantities of new propellants that will extend both the range and lethality of U.S. weapons systems. We're about to invest $3 million in that facility in order to create all of those special capabilities associated with that. Conjunction with that, we're going to invest about $6 million in our Massachusetts facility to start to create some of the non-explosive components that we then bring to New Hampshire. So it's very much a collaborative effort, but it's also an extremely specialized capability. We even have some large companies in the area that are coming to us saying, can we use your facility? Because it's so hard to get into some of the government facilities to do that. So I think it's an example of a specialized capability that only the government can fund, and we're happy to be bringing that to the area.
Well, thank you for that. You know, the University of New Hampshire is home to the Foster Program, or the Focus SBIR STTR Teaching, Entrepreneurship, and Results Program, you know, which has the basic mission of helping to guide small businesses through the SBIR and STTR processes. I'd like to just ask our witnesses to speak a little bit more about how these types of university-based programs have been force multipliers and really helped the SBIR and STTR programs. And maybe starting with you, Mr. Glover.
The FAST programs and regional outreach programs are primarily with the universities and small business development centers in many of the states. They've done an excellent job. But it's a challenge because, quite frankly, they don't have the culture in there. And you will often find that the SBIR is the only real opportunity for a company in certain areas, certain rural areas, have-not states, and, that are not on the coast. And it's a real challenge. And we've seen them be successful and really do a great job. But getting people to write proposals is a critical issue because you can't win if you don't submit a proposal. And the studies show that there's a direct relationship with the number of proposals submitted by a state and the number of awards they win.
So I work a lot with the University of Massachusetts at Lowell and their outreach, similar to the UNH outreach. And what I find really valuable there for SBIR companies is not only the foster type of programs to teach you how to write a proposal, but the depth of research and the infrastructure that you can access to do different research pieces. The other thing that I really like about what the UMass Lowell system, what they're doing with their advanced research centers, they're partnering with industry. So it's not just how do you get started, how do you do the research, but if I were to use a golf analogy, my husband would be so happy I'm doing this. If it's the swing through, right? It's where do you go? Well, I guess I can't take that golf analogy any further. I tried. But it's the swing through, right? And so I think it's universities, and to Jerry's point, partnering also with industry for that business model kind of understanding.
Dr. Marinelli, did you want to add anything?
Sir, I mean, I think one of the key things that we see is a lot of our new technology that we bring into our company actually starts with the universities. More often than not, the way we bring technology out of the universities is to actually hire the students. And then the professors come along for the ride. So I think it's very critical. Some of our UUV programs we actually do with the University of New Hampshire off the pier there. We're working with one of the chemistry professors at UNH on our energetics programs. Universities are critical here, and we need to maintain their strength throughout this activity. They're critical to the future workforce of the country.
Well, I appreciate that, and I'm going to be fighting really hard for the critical funding and the certainty that we need for our small businesses and for our universities. You mentioned the Paperwork Reduction Act. I just want to invite all of our witnesses today, any ideas you have about how to simplify and streamline these processes, including the use for SBIR of other transitional authority. Really welcome all of your ideas because this is going to be critical to these programs really continuing to leverage the taxpayer dollars that they do in extraordinary ways. So thank you. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
The gentlelady yields back. Now I recognize Ms. Simon from the great state of California for her 5 minutes.
Chair Williams, I love it when you say the great state, because I will remind you again, it really is. It's a lot warmer than D.C., sir, in my 8 weeks. I want to thank you all for coming today, and I just really had a great time reading the materials and your testimony prior to this hearing. I, like I believe everyone on this committee, wants the United States to be first in innovation. There's no doubt about that. Some of you may have heard, because I keep talking about the amazing CRISPR lab at the University of California. I visited last week and saw all these amazing students, met our Nobel Prize winning professor and physician scientist at that lab. They have proven, they have cured sickle cell anemia in one woman who will no longer have to spend nights away from her children, spending tens of thousands of dollars every emergency room visit. They are light speed ahead on finding treatments for ALS and really working with dementia patients to make their quality of life better. This amazing lab with these brilliant young students, really new lab technology. It was sparkling. And I think about Exelexis and Science Corp. Alameda County is an innovation hub where some of the most, I will say, brilliant folks in the world who, yes, are from the United States, and some folks who have come across the world to study in our beautiful facilities to change the lives of folks. I know this to be true. I have told my story, and I'll tell it every single day. As a widow of a great man who died of cancer, who was in a clinical trial, our lives will forever be changed because we got a little bit of extra time because of great scientists who dedicated their lives to both the public sector and the private sector. I have a question, and it might be a comment. I am super concerned that in this moment, maybe even right now, there are folks who are being fired from the SBA. There are folks who are being fired from DOE and a Department of Health. How the hell are we going to facilitate more opportunity for innovators and researchers and folks who will literally change the world, be it in 10 years? They have an idea right now. And if it is difficult in this moment to access small business innovation research grants and resources and small business technology transfer resources, if it's difficult now before the slashing and burning of staff in these critical departments who serve our innovators and small businesses, we're talking about continuing resources for these folks. Well, guess what? If nobody answers the phone or no one's answering the inquiry on the website, our folks are going to be left, they're going to be left dry. And as a result of what is happening throughout the administration, we know if you talk to physician scientists, if you talk to innovators, if you talk to that young 26-year-old who's working at Genentech, working on a data model that I couldn't even fathom how complicated it was, seeing it on a screen, who's this close to that thing, what's going to happen? Children are going to die. There's actually a family walking around the halls right now. There's a young child who has a very rare disease. I'm hoping to meet them today. The baby is about 3 years old, waiting for that next thing. No one's answering the phone. No one's reading the applications. I cannot trust an AI algorithm to read an application that literally has the propensity and the opportunity to save a generation. We got to do better. I guess, sir, I love all of your bios, so inspired by your work. Thank you for your service. But I could just pick and choose, maybe Mr. Glover, and thank you so much for coming. What are the adverse effects of having low staffing as, again, we're trying to push and we're talking about reestablishing resources for our innovators, our scientists, for our pharmaceutical geniuses who are changing the way that, for instance, the elderly live out their last years and months. If these folks can't get in touch with folks or there's decreased infrastructure, what happens?
I don't know. We hope things always get better. We're optimistic and we hope things get better. But I don't have an answer for you.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate all of you here and the work that you're doing, and I yield back. Thank you so much for being here, and I look forward to working with you all as we move forward and try to figure this thing out for our people. Thank you. Yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. I now recognize Mr. Jack from the great state of Georgia for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to each witness for being here today. Innovation has long been the driving force behind America's global leadership, whether in technology, medicine, or defense. Yet in an era of rapidly advancing technologies and increasing global competition, we must continue to foster an environment where American businesses, particularly small businesses across each and every one of our congressional districts, can thrive. Thanks to the chairman, I serve as the chairman of the subcommittee on innovation, entrepreneurship, and workforce, and I look forward to working with each and every one of you going forward to help strengthen the environment in which our small businesses can thrive. But I'd like to first start with Dr. Marinelli, if I could. I know you've had an opportunity a few times here today to talk about a few suggestions, but specifically the administrative complexity of applying to SBIR and STTR programs favors those, in my opinion, with strong networks of prior participants. In your testimony, you highlighted some great opportunities for the programs to increase participation, and if you could just take a moment yet again to reiterate your suggestions in reducing the barriers to competing for these programs.
So I think as ML spoke, you know, my career started with the program 40 years ago, and it was a much simpler process then. The solicitations were simpler, the proposal formats were fairly common. Today, I don't handle these directly anymore, but it's bewildering to look at the different types of solicitations, the different formats you need to respond to. We get messaging all the time about changes in the solicitations that make it difficult for our staff to understand, and we're a very experienced firm. It makes it difficult for us to understand sometimes how to respond to some of these solicitations. I can't imagine what it's like right now for a small company coming in. We have unbelievable IT requirements on ourselves these days. We get a lot of attention to that. I can't imagine a small firm being able to do many of the certifications anymore that would be required to continue on in the program very long. So I think there does need to be some recognition that there are people who aren't like us, who don't have that experience, and kind of a toned-down version of the application process that would enable them to put their ideas forward. I think that's probably very important.
Wonderful. Thank you. And to Cyrus, because as you noted, we're not going to pronounce your last name. After the initial application, my understanding is that small businesses need more support in transitioning through the multiple phases of the application process. And a common trend we're seeing of China's success in stealing American technology comes from closing the funding gap and directly supporting the scale-up through small business investment. Given the challenges of private sector investment and long-term technology development within the U.S., how can SBIR be modified to help small businesses, small manufacturers better overcome the capital crunch between Phase 2 and 3?
Yeah, if there's an increase in the dollar amount, I know a lot of innovators will not even bother applying for SBIRs because they believe the dollar amount is too low. I think if it was moved up probably to 2 million, you would get a lot more buy-in. And some of the innovators believe that, okay, we will succeed commercially before we ever come back to the government and try to sell a service contract because the SBIR process is too cumbersome for them to apply.
Wonderful. I appreciate that. I'm just going to close, Mr. Chairman, by noting something that I think does impact small business writ large, but we talk about the regulatory environment, and some of these regulations that have been foisted upon small businesses in previous administrations have had a deleterious impact to their ability to succeed. And tomorrow, our House is going to vote on a Congressional Review Act resolution led by my good friend Gary Palmer and myself, and it's to repeal a regulation and rule that would affect a company in my congressional district. It's about tankless water heaters. I know all my colleagues are tired of me saying it, but just to share with, and I'll ask a closing question, there was a regulation and a rule imposed on the non-condensing tankless water heater industry, which just so happens to be completely manufactured in my congressional district, that we're seeking to repeal tomorrow in our legislative body. So if I can close out with you, ML, it's not germane to the testimony today, but when it comes to the regulatory environment, could you just offer 30 seconds about what we as a small business committee can do to help improve the regulatory environment in which small businesses operate today?
I think I have a quick, short answer for you. I would recommend that you speak to the National Small Business Association. They have a committee that focuses on regulatory burden on environmental and would be directly related to this. I think and I say that because I think the best way you can come up with making it easier is ask the small businesses. And NSBA can give you that voice. I think you need to ask across the board, but I'd start with them.
Well, I applaud the chairman for consistently providing us an opportunity to engage with small businesses and hear directly from y'all. I appreciate that recommendation. I thank each and every one of you for taking the time to come up today to share with us some ideas to better improve the environment in which you all thrive. Thank you.
Gentleman yields back. I now recognize Dr. Kelly Morrison from the great state of Minnesota for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for holding this hearing, and thank you so much to our witnesses for being here today. Sorry, I'm all the way now down on the other end of the ties. It's great to see so much bipartisan consensus about the important role that SBIR and STTR programs play in supporting American innovation. Thanks for taking the time to testify, Mr. Glover. In your testimony, you mentioned that one of the strengths of the SBIR and STTR programs is in its investment in innovation across the country, providing funds to small businesses in all 50 states. My own home state of Minnesota has received nearly 3,000 awards since the program began in 1982, ranging from investments in unmanned ground robotic systems for DoD surveillance and reconnaissance to robotic greenhouse gas monitoring to measure the impacts of climate-smart farming practices, to reducing energy usage of wearable devices through sleep science-informed algorithms, demonstrating, I think, that great ideas and scientific breakthroughs can come from anywhere. Mr. Glover, could you elaborate on why it's important for the SBA to promote innovation across the country? How can we enhance the geographic and demographic diversity of program participants, and how would increasing that diversity of applicants impact the competitiveness of the SBIR and STTR programs?
SBA has been reaching out to try to do that, and they have bus tours where they go to underserved states and try to get work with the universities, work with those to do outreach. I think that more needs to be done, and we have to be careful, because if we allow venture capital to be the selection criteria, although it's illegal, what we find is awards, and some of the jumbo awards especially, just going to a very few states. So we've got to make sure that we don't let venture capital be the deciding factor of who wins an award. If they have matching money, that was always prohibited, because matching money meant the states in the middle of the country didn't have anybody to match with. So we've got to be careful about that and how that selection criteria goes. We looked at the Super Jumbo Awards, and we found out that out of $13 billion of venture capital, some $7 billion before the awards, $6 billion after, $11 billion of that went to one state, California. So we got to be careful, because obviously selecting those companies indirectly meant that it went to primarily one state, and that was just not a good idea. So we've got to make sure that we look at that. We don't want to choose based on anything but merit, not geographic, because we don't want to get the second best technology for our warfighters or for healthcare. But we do need to be sensitive to that issue, and thank you for the question.
Thank you for that answer. In the Army and DoD in general, female casualties have a significantly lower survival rate than male casualties. Architecture Technology, Inc. is an engineering company headquartered in my district that provides solutions to complex system problems. Last year, it was granted an SBIR award to address the gender survivability gap by developing augmented reality that provides gender-specific medical training to soldiers. Ms. Mackey, I appreciate your testimony on how SBIR and STTR programs have enabled small businesses to work in coordination with the federal government to provide ingenuity and advancements in the defense sector. Could you speak to the SBIR and STTR's programs' ability to address specific challenges or address issues for overlooked populations, such as women in the military?
So I think I'd answer that in two ways. The first is, some years ago, the Navy asked me to help them do some outreach to underserved communities, women and ethnic, and they said, so, Emily, you're a woman CEO, like, how would we have found you? And I go, well, not the ways you're looking. And mostly because I wouldn't have recognized myself, or our skill set is applicable to the DoD. So I'm sort of overgeneralizing to make a point. So I help them figure out how to do outreach outside of the Beltway and to different organizations, but you have to give examples of how you're meaningful. I think it would be, the second point I'd make is, I think it's really interesting on the geographic diversity to be thoughtful to how much ingenuity we have in the center of the country. I work a lot in sustainment capabilities with the Department of Defense. So figuring out how to make equipment continue to run, to have longer remaining useful life, to I just feel like there's a lot of good ideas that might be on our farms that those folks wouldn't think of themselves as technologists. it might be interesting to consider how do we put the experienced companies that know how to write SBIR proposals together with some of the subject matter expertise to address, and maybe there's a program or some thoughtfulness we can do that really helps share and network that kind of collaboration.
I love that answer. Thank you. How do you think permanently authorizing the SBIR and STTR programs help ensure that small businesses can continue to bring cost-effective and valuable innovation to the Department of Defense?
Gentlelady's time is up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. She yields back. For being here, for your testimony, and for appearing and sharing yourself with us. Without objection, members have 5 legislative days to submit additional materials and written questions from the witnesses to the chair, which will be forwarded to the witness. And I will say, I hope you see that there is some bipartisanship in this town and in this building, and we're working on a lot of things together in this committee. So I ask the witnesses to please respond promptly, and if there's no further business without objection, the committee is adjourned.